Well, when you sit down, it's time for the conversation. I would have said joining me. Unfortunately, our guest was not able to join us today. And this is a regret message that he shared ahead of our interview on this day. He says, "I'm sorry, I will not be able to come because of the divisive nature of the matter. The meeting has been called for the church to take a stand." And that just goes to show the gravity of the matter and why such voices are important. And for that reason, the show will go on as the show must go on, and we will tweak it just a little bit, and we will review and reflect on some of the sermons that Reverend Wainaina has given before, speaking on this very matter. This is not a new issue. He's spoken about it in church before, and we'll just dig out those sermons and bring them to you. Now, we know that the good Reverend has gone viral, particularly with his last two sermons. And the reason why he went viral is because he used the pulpit not only to nourish Christians spiritually, but to also talk about the social injustices and the current state of the country. What is going on as political temperatures begin to rise ahead of a BBI referendum and the 2022 general elections? Reverend Wainaina is using his platform as the canon of the All Saints Cathedral Church to plead and beseech his people to seek alternative facts when they're looking at politics and dealing with politicians. However, this has come at a price because people are saying it's not in the place of the church to talk about such things. And this is the response he has for such critique.
Now, whenever the church speaks, the kind of advice we are given is, could you preach peace and unity? That is a soft way of telling the church, be quiet, or just preach that people may just be peaceful and have unity. But let me tell you this morning. The gospel of Jesus Christ is not neutral. It challenges our sins. It challenges the ills of our society. And there is no day when Jesus was neutral in his gospel. And so to tell us just to preach peace and unity, it can't happen until our own sinfulness, our own ills of the society are challenged by the gospel of Jesus Christ. And so don't advise us to just preach peace and unity. We know what the gospel says, and we will preach the entire gospel. And me as the provost here, for the time I'll be here, I'll speak the truth of the word of God, regardless of who, because it's not my gospel. It is the gospel of Jesus Christ. And it must percolate and challenge every sector of our society. I don't support any political position. I am here to speak to the nation.
Well, as we've heard the good Reverend say, it's in the place of the church to talk about these issues. It's in the place of the church to talk about the daily struggles of the people that go to church. It's in the place of the church sometimes to open the eyes of the people to some of the problems that they go through. However, this is a path traversed by very few people. I mean, very few religious leaders have taken a stand when it comes to such divisive matters, or rather murky waters of politics and social justice in communities. In America, we saw Reverend Al Sharpton take a very firm stand when it came to the murder of George Floyd, when he eulogized him in church and equally gave a sermon. And he was very particular when he said there are very many punks on the pulpit who will not be able to have the guts to stand up and speak out against certain injustices. We know Timothy Njoyer has spoken about some of these issues, Desmond Tutu, Martin Luther King, and that's why Reverend Canon Wainaina says he's not afraid to lend his voice to this cause.
You know what? And I said this during my first sermons. You don't need to be popular. Democracy teaches us that majority are right. It's not true. For Caleb, he was actually a minority. He was a lone voice. And if you've been waiting for people to rise up for you to speak, please speak. Currently, the church is silent about what is happening in this country. Let me tell you, even if I'm the lone voice I'll speak. I'll tell the leaders to behave and not to destroy this nation. And this one I draw from Caleb, who stands when everybody is conforming. He chooses to be different. And he says that let us go. The positive attitude is one good character of anyone here if you want to stand strong wherever you are and where corruption is.
Kenya is a good country. I mean, by all means, when you travel out, when you talk to people, and when you just reflect, we are not doing that bad. We are doing well. However, there is a disconnect or a problem somewhere. COVID-19 has exposed the weaknesses in the system, and even the people that we thought were doing well, the economy that we thought was doing well, was shaken to the core. If you look at the numbers, the World Bank put our growth at negative 1.5. The Treasury had to revise from about 5 to 2.5 to about 1% because they could not go to the negative territory. If you look at the GDP of the country in the second and the third quarter, it slumped below negative 5 percentage points. This says a lot, but where's the disconnect? Where's the problem? Well, Reverend Wainaina says it boils down to our national values, our core. One man wants to have everything and another cannot have anything. And this is the grid that translates when it comes to national projects such as the SGR, where we've seen a lot of controversy and money being looted. And Reverend Wainaina says it's because as a nation, we are not anchored on core values or principles that translate to values that can propel us to growth as a nation. Listening.
Principles are important because they function like a map, allowing us to make wise decisions. But let me tell you, we must move from principles to internalize them now. They become what? Value-laden in our society. It must be internalized. You transition a principle into a value. It is better, and anybody will follow that value because it's internal. Caleb had a value system. He was a man of conviction, consistent, wholehearted, and people-centered. What we lack in Kenya are not principles. We lack values. We believe in hard work that brings wealth, isn't it? That is a principle that is universal, but it's also timeless. We all believe that when you work hard, and Kenyans know how to work hard. However, we have never internalized that principle to help us now move it into a value. That is a principle, and it applies everywhere. However, we as Kenyans have become a nation of thieves. A nation of thieves minus opportunities. All of us are busy looking for opportunity to make wealth. It is even sadder when Christians call such things as blessings or breakthroughs. Haven't you heard them say, I got a breakthrough, and it's corruption? Can I tell you this? When you go there and become corrupt, even if you brought all the money, not just tithe, and brought it to the altar here, God cannot be bribed by you. You will not get the blessing. God blesses what He has given us through good and hard work. Those tenders you do there, and you corrupt your way by bribing, don't bring blessings on you. You will see the effect of those things even on your children.
Well, that's our problem as a nation, okay? But what's our problem as a people? And this is something that you and I know, because in every 5 years, just like we are seeing now, actually 3 years to the general election, we are beginning to retrieve to our tribal cocoons and saying, this is our man, and so is our man. And that is where the Reverend has used his time to poke holes at, because he says, in an ideal society, we should judge people and leadership on meritocracy and not on the mother tongue that they speak.
Dr. Israel Nonyerem Davidson who is a Nigerian, speaking in the context of Nigeria, but in the larger context of Africa as well. And I'm going to quote him verbatim. He says, despite the abundant human and natural resources and exemplary achievements of African professionals abroad, our nations remain backwards. P.W. Botha of South Africa in 1988 said these words. It is him who is quoting P.W. Botha. And he says that black people cannot rule themselves because they don't have the brain and the mental capacity to govern themselves. You give them guns, they will kill themselves. You give them power, they will loot the treasury. Give them independence and democracy, and they will use it to promote tribal, ethnic bigotry, hatred, killings, and war. End of P.W. Botha's quotation. It is a racist, actually, quotation. But what Dr. Israel continues to say is this. Since 1988, when this racist leader said these words, have our own leaders proven him wrong? We are the only race, we the blacks, that are ready and willing to sacrifice meritocracy. It is Israel saying. So we are the only race in the world that is ready and willing to sacrifice meritocracy, national development, progress, to favor protection of tribal and religious loyalty, despite the recycling consequences before us since independence. Now, Israel continues to say that despite our high literacies in our countries, we are not moved by the quality of our leaders. That is why we are ridiculed everywhere in the world as Africans. We provide tribal, political, party or religious controls in terms of power. He says that is shameful. He continues to say that even our highly educated professionals and media outlets keep a blind eye on the realities of the African states for tribal, religious, and personal considerations. Why do our nations remain the poverty capitals of the world? We are devalued and humiliated across the world. Then he asks an important question. Who did this to us?
Now we know what's our problem as a people. However, where's the fault in our leaders? Well, the good Reverend, in his sermon, he's been teaching about the qualities of a leader and what leadership demands from people. And he was very keen to point out in his previous sermon, before last Sunday's sermon, that politicians have a way of dividing us. And if not with tribe, they use social class and social status. And currently, there are two wings in the country. One, you see Tanga Tanga, the other one, you see Kieleweke. However, there's a new popular one, hustlers versus dynasty. And the hustler branch has been branded as the branch of the common wananchi, where they're giving you wheelbarrows and cartwheels and empowering you at grass level in a way that politicians think is best for you. Dynasty are those people who have been able to make money, come from influential families, but the line is beginning to get blurry because 2 years ahead of the election, we're beginning to see violence crop. We're beginning to see intolerance crop. And the Reverend is questioning the intention and the genuine nature of the hustler versus dynasty notion.
Now, the biggest narrative that is being peddled around is that one of dynasty versus hustlers. You know, this is a very, very dangerous way to divide people. There were times when people were divided against one tribe, against another, that way, or a group of tribes against others. Politicians will always do that. But can I give a disclaimer here that it is good to take care of people at the base of the pyramid. The poor needs to be taken care of. However, we cannot incite people against others. That's how many of our illicit groups like Mungekes, like Chingororos and the others actually came up, even the Mombasa one. That's how they come up. You know, when you are told you are a hustler and you see somebody with a house, you see somebody with a car, what do you call them? A dynasty, isn't it? Now, let me ask you, and I know which levels of society you come from. For you to buy that car that you have today, how many loans have you taken against it? For you to buy a house in Nairobi, how many loans have you taken against it? Can you imagine if somebody comes in the name of hustler and burns your house and takes your shirt because you represent the wealthy? That is stigmatizing people. And if you want to stigmatize people, you start by branding people. You are a hustler, you are a dynasty. You saw, I think it is last week or so, somebody who has worked hard in Nakuru from a very humble beginning and buying a car. I think he had something to do with the motorbike guys, and what did they do? They burnt that car in the name of, these are dynasties. I saw another one as well, I think it was yesterday, of a lorry full of cattle that was burnt again by people in the name of hustlers versus the dynasties. Let me tell you, sit there comfortably, but you will be branded. If you don't stand strong against this narrative, it will be against you. Don't be entertained when you hear these things.
Elections will come and go, just like 2022, it will come and go. 2017 came and went. 2013 came and went. And the most controversial and gory and painful election that Kenya has ever gone through, the 2007 cycle. And it's not just a Kenyan problem. Uganda recently went to the polls and Bobi Wine has been under house arrest for a long time. And the current leader, President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, has stuck to power. And we've seen that here in Kenya. People go to court. Some do not want to relinquish the reins of power. And the Reverend says that is where the problem begins. Because most recently we saw a charade in the United States of America. There was an insurrection. But when the inauguration day came, irrespective of what happened, Joe Biden became the president of the United States of America. Reverend is asking, what's the strength of institutions vis-a-vis the strength of politicians in this country?
Some of us are using the American example and saying how America is just like Africa because of the behaviors of Trump. Can I tell you something? On the 20th of January, whether Trump wants or not, there will be a president in the US. Why is Africa, how different is Africa from America? The difference is they have strong institutions and they can remove a president from the seat. Their institutions are strong. What about in us in Africa and in Kenya? Our institutions are weak. We have built political parties around tribal groups, not on the institutions. So you can use our courts to bring in a new deputy governor in Nairobi in a corrupt manner. Our institutions are weak. And that is the difference between us and America. I know our own dictators in Kenya and in Africa have now become like saints when they compare themselves with Trump. No, Trumps can be removed and America will continue to be great. What about our African nations? Can I say this? The fact that one person grew up in a poor environment doesn't make them poor today. This hustler nation thing, some of those who are proponents are people who are very rich, aren't they? Very, very rich. But because they come from your tribes, you can't criticize them. You can't speak against them. Let me tell you, once you are branded, you will suffer for it. and it is time for us to stand for integrity.
Last but not least, last Sunday, he hammered the final nail into the coffin, or so we think. We have to wait for next Sunday to hear what he has in stock for congregants, and not just his congregants at the All Saints Cathedral, but Kenyans in general. And he spoke very passionately about an issue that is very hot in the country, and that is BBI and its role in embettering my life and your life, and what we stand to gain as a country, but most importantly, what the political class stand to gain from this document and its implementation. It has brought a lot of chaos. Some have supported him, some have not supported him, and it is for him giving that sermon that he couldn't be here with us today. But as they say, the gospel must be preached, so listening to that sermon.
No wonder the president the other day confessed that 2 billion shillings are lost every day. Now, you know, Mr. President is not just a simple guy. When a whole president confesses that 2 billion shillings are lost, believe it, it's true. Mr. President, thank you for the confession that we are all thieves minus opportunities. But what does that tell you? Mr. President, you have the EACC, you have the DPP, you have the NIS, you have every government machinery at your disposal. Either the government knows who steals the Kenyan money, or the government is part of the stealing. What are you telling Kenyans when you confess such? That you are defeated? Who will save then this country if the president cannot save us? We have become a nation of thieves. Up to now, KEMSA report is not out, even after the president gave the ultimatum. Either the government then knows the thief, or they are part of the scheme. Now, no wonder. Nowadays, everybody wants to be a politician. Why? The moment they are elected, the first thing they ask, what is there for me? If that is the way you go asking for employment as believers, and the first thing you ask is how you can steal, there are no blessings on us as Kenyans. And these are some of the things that are fueling the hustler dynasty narrative. We have money for BBI, which will only benefit only a few people at the top, the kingpins. BBI will not solve your problems. They only want to benefit at the top so that they can share. We can have money for BBI, but we have no money to build schools that our children learn under the trees. Then the CS talks about it is good for oxygen. We don't lack oxygen even in classes. Our counties cannot receive 15% of the allocation, which is constitutional. Then you want to argue to me that the BBI comes and solves all your problems and gives you 35. If you can't give 15, how do you give 35? Why the lie? Let me remind Kenyans that when your tribal man becomes the president or takes the 5 top seats, as per the proposal of the BBI, you will remain poor. Ask those people, those tribes that have produced presidents, have they benefited from it? No, they're even poorer. Politicians have their agenda to eat and loot this country. What we need, we as Kenyans, are opportunities for employment, roads, networks, markets for our produce, quality health care, and quality education for every Kenyan. Let me conclude by saying this, that if you as a nation, if you are a Christian nation, then our values should be led by the scripture. In conclusion, it is sad that most leaders are motivated by power, influence, and money. It is even grievous when this happens in churches. The church then loses her moral authority to challenge corruption and sin. Churches have opened their podiums to politicians to attack their opponents. Reggae must stop in churches. And I want to tell politicians, in this cathedral, this podium will never be used by you. Let me tell Christian leaders, close your churches to politicians. You are going to destroy this country. And remember, whoever pays the piper calls the tune.
I was previously listening to one of the interviews that Reverend Wainaina gave previously before he couldn't be able to talk about the matter until the church makes a stand. And he says the gospel of Christ is not neutral. The gospel of Christ must be transformational. Christ in himself was a transformational leader. And instead of being liked, you'd rather tell people the truth that they don't want to hear, and you'll be at peace with yourself because you told them what they needed to hear. The good book says, my people perish because they lack knowledge. Well, Reverend Canon Wainaina has done his part by imparting the so much needed knowledge that you needed. Now you know it. Question is, are you going to act on your newfound knowledge? After the break, Vincent Odhiambo takes us to the streets.